Now we come to investigating action queries. All the queries we've done so far have been select queries. They have selected some data from our database and displayed it to us. So we've been able to filter data and filter columns of data and even run some calculations to calculate data, but it's still not making any changes to the actual raw data in the database. With action queries, we can make changes to the database. The first action query we're going to investigate is the make table query. Now, whichever type of action query you're going to do, we still need to go down the same route as if we were creating a select query, which is the create ribbon, query design, and then choose where we want to get our data from. So let's choose the customers, first name, last name, email address, and let's put in the country region name so that we can filter it by one of the countries. Let's go for Australia, which is not actually 1, but 7. View, and I see I have 3,589 Australian customers. Now, having made this select query, these are the information that I want. I would like to actually create a new table using this data. To change this select query into a make table query, we come up to the Query Tools Design sub-ribbon and choose Make Table. We then get the Make Table dialog box that will allow us to take the data that we've got and create a new table either in the current database or in another database, which I can actually browse to and select. We want to stay in the current database for the moment. And in the table name here, I either choose an existing table, but you need to be very careful about that because it will overwrite that existing table, or I type in a new table name. So TBL Australian customers. Okay, now let's just save this query so that you can see it in the navigation pane. Query make Australians. Okay. Now the query appears here, but it looks different from a normal select query in that it has an exclamation mark next to it. That indicates that it's an action query, and it has a little new table icon to indicate that it's a make table action query. So if I now want to view the records that this query will affect, I use the view option and I can see my Australian customers. If I actually want to run the make table query, so that is it will create the TBL Australian customers, then I choose the run option. So there are two different icons here and they both do two different things. If it's a select query, they effectively do the same thing because you're running a select query. With a make table query, they do two different things. View shows me the data that I will get. Run will actually do the make table query. So if I click run now, because what I'm about to do is actually not dangerous, but it will affect a vast amount of data, I'm asked if I'm sure. You are about to paste 3,589 rows into a new table. Once you click yes, you cannot undo this. Are you really sure? Yes, I am. And you see my new table appears over on the left, TBL Australian customers, which is exactly the same data that I've just selected in my customers table, but it's now in its own table. So if any changes are made to the customers table, those changes are not reflected in my TBL Australian customers. So the make table query is actually quite useful for capturing snapshots of data at a particular point in time, for example, or extracting the information that you need for a mail shot, or things like that. Anything where you just want to move the data permanently out of a table. It's also quite useful for making tables of non-normalized data by linking a few tables together and then making a new table from the linked data so it no longer has all those joins. I also find it quite useful when trying to normalize databases. So if I close this particular query for the moment, when we look at our customers table, we've already done some normalization, but we could go much further, for example, by doing the gender, or the education, or the occupation. Let's choose the education as an example. Now my first step here is how do I know what education options are already in the data, and how do I then create a new table using them? Well, let's use a make table query to do that for us. So we close the table, create query in design, customers. I'm only interested in the education. Now when I view that, I see everybody's education, whether it's repeated or not. But I can change that into unique values by simply grouping. And view, and then you see I get all the unique options for education. We then change this into a make table query, and I'm going to call it TBL education. OK. Save the query, QRY, make education. Now, if you're creating a query as we are here to do a single job, and once that job's done, you're not going to use it again, then probably, in fact more than probably, you shouldn't really save the query. You don't need to save the query. You're never going to need it again. But for training purposes, I've saved it so that you can see it here on the left-hand side. Black exclamation mark indicates the action query. A little table with a little bit of sun next to it indicates making a new table. So let's run this. I'm going to paste 6 rows into a new table. Fine, go ahead, please. And there's my TBL education. I'm just going to change the blank one to be undefined. And then the only thing I would then need to do for this table is add a primary key. Let's insert a row, education ID. We can make it an auto number and set it as the primary key. Saving our table. So when we view, each of our education options now has a single unit primary key. And it's these IDs that we would need to use to populate the customer's table. But we're going to do that with a different action query in the next lesson. This one is about making new tables. The tip will be to create a select query that selects the data you wish to make into your new table, and then change the query type under Query Tools Design into Make Table, tell it the name of the table you'd like to make, and then Run will actually make that table. If the table already exists, it will be deleted first and then recreated with the new data.